Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to episode 3 of The Ways We Move. And I am your host, Nicholas Czar. Today, I have a wonderful friend of ours who's coming to talk a little bit about what they're doing in the advanced air mobility, and that's Don Berchoff, who is the founder of TruWeather, TRU. Weather, important to say. So, without further ado, we'll let Don introduce himself a little bit in that, and after that, we'll ask questions as to what in the world are they doing and what are they bringing to advanced air mobility in general. Don, tell us a little bit about you.
Well, Nicholas, I'm a New York guy. I grew up in Queens, and when I was about 7 years old, we had a major snowstorm in New York City, and I was told I had to go out and shovel. Back then they made kids do things outside,
That's true. That's true.
and it was 16 inches of snow, and I was only 3.5, 4 feet tall, so it was memorable, and I just became so fascinated by weather. Just thinking about how does this happen? Why does this happen? And that was the beginning of a journey. And you could say I had my 10,000 hours of Malcolm Gladwell before I got to college. I used to keep diaries of weather. I was very, very attuned, and I picked up a sixth sense for it, and got my meteorology degree and was lucky enough to join the Air Force. And, I practiced my trade and applied it to a mission critical operation in a time when weather forecasting isn't as good as it is now. And aviation weather is really hard even today because we don't have a lot of data below 5,000 feet. And so it's become kind of my last hurrah to figure out how do we transform the weather system as we know it, which is getting kind of old. We haven't really had a major upgrade in data collection since 1992, when we deployed the last weather radar network, NEXRAD. And so we're getting more sensitive to weather. I'm not even talking about the climate change,
Right.
but
Right.
more around just the way we move, the way people live really in tightly closed areas now. And if you're talking about autonomous vehicles, weather it's really weather sensitive, and the current weather system wasn't built for this industry. And so now it's time to upgrade and go to Weather 4.0, and that's what TruWeather is trying to push and also deploy.
Wow, that's okay. So that's very well said, and you've explained a lot there in about a minute or so. But it's true, you guys are really answering the 5,000 feet and below weather atmosphere, basically what we're going through. And it's interesting because advanced air mobility, for those of you who don't know, we're going to be flying at no more than 4,000 feet, right? So, and it's true. What you're saying is I was watching or listening to the ATC recordings, and the only weather forecast that we have under that is really ATC talking to the pilots and saying, this guy is heavy, careful with turbulences, go up there, go up there. These guys saw rain, sleet, whatever you want to name it. So there's really nothing out there. And I think maybe people think that we've got radars everywhere and we know what's going on, but no, we don't. So this is more or less what you're answering for our new adventure in AAM. Is that correct?
Yeah, so we do have METARs that we collect at airports, the automated weather systems, but people always ask me, Don, how relevant is that from the airport? And I say, well, generally speaking, we use a rule of thumb. There's nothing scientific about this. It's just if you're within 5 miles of the airfield, we generally will accept the observation at the airfield as being relevant and correct. But the fact of the matter is, I was on Air Force bases. I ran an Air Force base, and I also had a serve on an Air Force base where we had F-16 pilots who we were on the west coast of Korea, and we would get sea fog, and one part of the runway could be zero visibility and the other part could be 7 miles, and that's on the same airfield. So the relevancy of weather and the observations are really, it's a really loosey-goosey kind of approach, because weather is going to decide to show up where it wants to, not where we have our weather observations. And what makes it worse than that is between METAR sites, we really don't have any real measurements of wind, visibility, ceiling, icing and cloud, wind shear aloft, We don't, below 5,000 feet. And 97% of the country doesn't have that. We do have weather radar, but weather radar only tells you where it's precipitating. It doesn't tell you what the winds are doing. It doesn't tell you what the cloud height is. It doesn't tell you these things. And these microclimates like ceiling and visibility, if you're flying a beyond visual line of sight mission, you're basically you could go in and out of 5 or 6 microclimates if you're flying 50 miles, and you won't know it because there's no data really that could tell you it's there unless you're watching a satellite image or you're talking to people who are in the weather. And you can't do that because there's going to be nobody on the aircraft anymore. So we're losing the best weather sensor we ever had. So if I want to, fly one-to-many drones, BVLOS, and I'm sitting in San Diego where the weather's always great, and I'm flying in Minneapolis or Minnesota where the weather is not always great in the winter, you won't even wake up in the same environment you're flying. That's a big difference with today's pilots. Most of them actually go out in the weather where they're flying. They've picked up lots of heuristics. They flew routes for many years. They learned what the uncertainty was, because I'm sure a pilot has, and a GA pilot and a helicopter pilot has run into weather that wasn't expected before. And that's not only because, it's not because we're bad at what we do in weather, it's just we don't have data. And we may not even know it's there. We may not have systems that know it's there. So when you talk about a forecast, we're not talking about a forecast. First of all, forecasts are uncertain.
Yeah, always.
And they're based on data that we have, and we try to estimate what's happening. And our physics and our data is insufficient below 5,000 feet to capture all those really impactful events all the time. So 30% of the time when you cancel or delay due to weather, even a manned or crewed aircraft, you could have flown. How many times do you see pilots go, hey, that weatherman, I could have flown today. I don't know if you've ever saw Curb By Enthusiasm, but I don't know if you remember the one where what's his face was going to go golfing, and the weatherman got on TV at LA and said, hey, tomorrow it's going to rain. Golf course is going to be bad. And Larry David woke up the next day and it was sunny, and he figured out that the weatherman was lying so he can clear the golf course for himself. He knew it wasn't going to rain. And sure enough, he went out there and accused him of that. But I mean, that's just a little lighthearted stuff, but it's uncertainty. And drones need more certainty because they're lighter, they're powered by battery, there's a conserved energy system, and the economics of weather are going to become much more critical for them to make money. They got to fly when they can fly in those windows, and they don't want to be on the ground. And that's what we're really trying to solve, is reduce that uncertainty so they can fly more, generate more revenue, and do it safely.
Wow, that's extremely granular what you're talking about, especially in that gray zone where we don't have as much information. And another good point you've made is the difference also between a drone, which is, for cargo, passenger less, and an eVTOL that will carry passengers. Usually drones are a little bit smaller. So therefore, any kind of climatic change, they'll feel it much more so than a heavier, bigger aircraft. Another example I always love to talk about.
Even the eVTOLs that carry people are going to feel a lot more.
A lot more than a regular airplane, slicing through the air. Absolutely, absolutely.
And we don't want them to have an uncomfortable experience. So we can't really remember, it's more than safety. It's also about a passenger experience that they will come back and fly with you. And our job in weather, and what we're trying to do at TruWeather, is we want to find that sweet airspace at a very granular level. So if you're flying around urban areas and you get Ventura winds through the canyons, those propagate. And where are they, and how do we stay away from them on days when we don't want to, fly people through there? It could be fine to fly for the aircraft, but it may not be fine to fly for the person on the aircraft.
That's true. And I think one good example of that I always think of is San Francisco. I mean, how many times you'll be walking one block, you're in shorts and t-shirts, next block, you just want to grab on a coat, you're freezing, or fog settles in, exactly like your runway situation where no visibility to 7-mile visibility. So do you find any specific places that you would like to work, or maybe you're gathering more data than other places?
Oh, we want to work where they're flying. I mean, our whole business model is predicated on getting sensors out, either through public-private partnerships with local state governments, or through investment and to build a business case where the highest density operations are, we can amortize the cost of that, those sensors and that data and that high resolution modeling we're going to run so everybody can afford it. And the goal is a 4-to-1 return on investment. And some people will be surprised how much money they lose in aviation, but due to uncertain weather. I mean, the numbers are astounding. They're over like $40 billion a year in the United States. And so, and TruWeather, my history in the Air Force is we already proved a lot of what we're doing in the Air Force. I did for Air Mobility Command. We proved in 1 year we could get back. They had 5,000 cancellations and delays in the years 1985 to 2000. 5,000 a year, 100,000 missions a year, 5%. And I saw this, and in 1 year we did a risk management approach to weather and convinced the dispatchers and the 4-star that, this is going to save us. You're going to get more assets. You're going to get more flight time. In the military, it's about, hey, let's not ground our high demand, low density assets. Let's not, we need our lift. We need it, right? So it wasn't about saving money. It was about getting more airplanes flying. In 1 year, we cut the delays from 5,000 to 1,800 just because of the approach we took. This is what TruWeather is going to do. Plus, we're going to add sensors. Most people don't understand what they're losing today. And it's all possible if you have the better data set. You don't have to depend on the current aviation weather system because you just get better data. You amortize that. You work together in an area, and we can get them all more reliability and more certainty.
So something that you brought into this equation is working together and everything. How do you feel the industry is moving forward? I mean, the way where I'm coming from is back in 2015, we were thinking of just hopping on, merrily hopping from building top to building top. And of course, now advanced air mobility is a much more mature and robust ecosystem. How do you see the industry moving forward, especially as it comes to the environment? Do you think people really understand how important it is to calculate all of this? Or do you still find yourself educating a lot of airports, potential vertiport owners out there?
The education is endless because we have a culture that grew up for so many years doing things the way they did it. And, it's hard to imagine flying an aircraft without a person on it and know how much they were bringing to the equation in flying safely through weather that was surprising. One of the biggest challenges that I've had is, even the government doesn't recognize weather as a ground risk. They recognize it as a hazard. And the problem is, and if you look at accident reports, and I did a post on this on LinkedIn, if you look at the even manned or crewed aviation accident reports, weather could be involved it could be a contributing cause in 60% of all non-fatal aircraft accidents and 20% of all fatal. But yet, only like 10%, and don't hold me to this, are actually attributed to weather. The rest of them are all attributed to pilot or pilot error. Well, you could do that when you could blame the pilot. You could say, hey, why'd you get in there? Why didn't you get out of it? What kind of procedures did you screw up while you were in it and cause it to crash? But in the future, there's gonna be no pilot on the aircraft. So
Yes.
And so here's the thing. The weather is unknowable.
Yeah.
So now you've lost that. And I don't think people recognize what they're losing on that aircraft by the human pilot who could sense the weather, because we're not going to replace that unless we get better data. Now, when that plane crashes, how are you going to blame the pilot for something that was unknowable? It's not like they got a weather brief, they were told to be careful, they flew, and they started going in it, and then they got themselves in trouble. No, it's going to be different. You're not going to know you're going in it sometimes until it's too late. And here's the thing. I maintain that I think that's ground risk. And if you look at what happened in Orlando, which I don't want to, I don't like to talk about these things. I'm very pro industry. I want this to work. I want this to work very badly. That's why I'm so dedicated on trying to help people understand we can reduce that risk and that uncertainty so they don't have this problem. And in Orlando, the winds were at Executive Airport, they were gusting to 22 knots. At the time, those aircraft were flying in that close formation. And those winds probably above the ground were stronger. And I will tell you in that case that I do attribute that to pilot error if that's what the FAA decides and they're doing an investigation. But let me, I have little doubt in my mind that the weather had to be a factor in some of that because the gustiness of those winds, gust spread is the most critical aspect of maintaining stability on a small drone. And because, it can handle the steady flow. It's just the gustiness. And so it would knock it out of its flight space. And that it doesn't take a lot for those when they're flying so closely to hit wings, So I don't know what happened, but all I'm saying is that in the future, first of all, weather is more contributing and probably a root cause of manned accidents than we give it credit for. So it's it's hidden. And second is when you do take the pilot off the aircraft and they're not flying it over their head, but they're 50 miles away, I think it's going to be that's a ground risk because weather is a ground risk. And so that's what I've been, trying to educate the FAA on. They have to think differently about this problem. And also, and not because we want to cost people money or anything like that, because what I maintain is we're going to save you money with better data. See, that's the piece that people have trouble understanding.
Yes.
And part of it is they have to change the way they do their planning and the way they make their decisions because they're not on the airplane anymore. So it's about retraining. It's about education. It's about understanding what's possible with these new weather systems, how they don't have to be very expensive if the cost is amortized. And really it comes down to it's an economics issue because if you're too conservative, that costs you money. So if an uncertainty costs you money. So, there has to be a meeting point in the middle where we say, look, we could do better.
Yeah, it's true. You brought you bring a lot of really great points. One of them is it's true that you've been very dedicated in this field. I remember a few years ago, I was moderating a panel. I think it was you were there with VFS, and I was always intrigued by your passion in it. And you're one of the rare people in the industry. We're about 10 or 20 of us who are really that dedicated and go out there and talk at almost any event just to make people understand that. You also brought something that could be interesting for our listeners and our watchers is what is the role of AI, if any, into what you're doing right now? And I know AI is a big topic. AI is a big umbrella. It's a lot of different technologies altogether. We're going to skirt this because I have somebody else who will come in and talk about AI. By the way, and in a little while, I'm going to want to have you with Skyway and everybody all together to talk about the projects that we're all working on. But what do you think is the role of AI in your industry specifically? Do you see a future for it, or how do you envisage it?
Well, like everything else, everyone looks for the simple solution. Everyone wants to be expedient. AI has its place in weather. It does. And I know where those are. And where we know they work well, we will implement it. The key about AI and weather is most of our data, historical data that we've collected in weather, which would have to be used as a training data set for AI predictions, it's all very, very based on uncertain understanding of what's really happening. So we do this analysis all over the whole world. Every so often we do an analysis and say, what do we think the winds were like 5 days ago at 3 UTC over Africa? Well, how many data points do you think we get over Africa? All right.
Yeah.
So here's the thing. What we do is we take the minimal number of data points we have and we try to estimate what the atmosphere was doing based on physics, based on those limited data sets. And then we put those into grid points. And those grid points are like 15 to 25 kilometer big. So what happens is people are taking AI and they're training their AI on this very uncertain data, which isn't even granular enough, saying this is going to help us forecast fog. Well, no, it can't. It can't. So it can do some things. And what we just heard is that Google DeepMind has been modeling the globe using AI, and they've been really competing with our best physics-based models for globe with the European Center pretty well. And they can run them in 10 minutes instead of 4 hours. But the challenge is they're going to be limited by the data eventually because you can't keep training something. So they've done a good job of taking that 25 or 10 kilometer resolution data, which works on a global scale because what are our models? They're 10-kilometer resolution. But when you start trying to fit AI for fog, stratus, winds in an urban canyon, we don't even have data. So TruWeather's approach is we're going to get sensors out. We're going to get these
Yes.
scanning wind LiDARs, and we're going to collect data, real data, and run real machine learning. And we can actually validate it because right now you can't validate your ML because there's no data. So it's all kind of hokey science. And so I'm not dismissing it because you could do good AI with, I believe for contrail prediction, you could do good AI and for precipitation. But other things, very, very difficult to do it well. But you can do it well if you do it right. But a lot of people aren't doing right. I like to say that, you remember Jack and the Beanstalk and he had two magic beans? Most people think AI in weather is two magic beans. It's not. It's just, it's a tool. And it needs data to be successful with it.
And you're right. Any tool needs also quality tools. And of course, in this case, we need a lot of precision measurement tools, which we don't have at this stage. So I like your approach of also using the hardware. And of course, AI can always help with that. We're running a little bit low on time, so I wanted to ask you another question. This is going to be less on the technical side of things, a little bit more about you. Why in the world are you doing this? Why aren't you working in a nice little 9-to-5 job and just mind your own business? You know, urban air mobility is a tough thing to do, huh? So
Well,
what kicks you out of bed in the morning?
Well, I mean, look, first of all, I don't know what a 9-to-5 job is for me. I've never worked 9 to 5 in my life.
Me
Even when I
neither.
was in the government, even when I was in the weather service, because I love what I do and I want to solve this problem. And for me, even the business is not about the money. It's about having the freedom and the ability to try to take on this challenge that I couldn't get accomplished in the government. I mean, I have 28 years in government service. I ran the science and technology director at the National Weather Service. I had a $130 million budget every year to find new technology and bring it into National Weather Service operations. And I could not get this problem even on the radar scope. So I left because I know where the technology is. I know where it's in the labs. I did R2O, research to operations. I understand technology and systems, and I'm a weatherman's weatherman. So I really understand the weaknesses of all our weather systems because I used to try to forecast and get beat up by pilots for it. So you learn a lot. And I think part of it is I did get beat up a lot by pilots. And I think it's kind of a syndrome. I got a little psychosis around that. I don't want to be beat up. I don't want people to beat us up. We're better than 50%. No. We're actually 80%. But people only give us credit when the weather, they don't give us credit for the nice days. And so we are 50-50 on the bad days because it's hard, right? And we don't have enough data. But so I think it's really about seeing a problem, being tired of like just people even our own career field sometimes in the industry, we just kind of get complacent. We don't move fast enough, but the solutions are there. We can do better. It's proven. And I think that's what gets me out of bed in the morning. And I guess, as long as I can keep the wheels on the bus in the business, which everyone knows a small business, not easy, especially in an industry that's growing. It hasn't even gotten its feet on the ground yet, and everyone else is operating in a new environment. And really, there's a risk in not even knowing when these new standards are going to come out. And we depend on that because I need BVLOS for me to really prove my business case. As long as we can continue moving forward and I'm having fun and I see people moving in the direction of understanding, which I do. We see more this year. I've seen more people coming back than ever. So isn't that what keeps you getting up in the morning, I guess?
Yeah, it's absolutely 100%. It's the futurists. We know that there is something we're getting to. We know we have this thing here. It's formless right now. We're not operational just yet, but we know we have to get there. We have an idea on how to get there. And after that, it's every day you chip at it and something happens. And thankfully, we all connect with one another and everything. So tell me a little bit, where can people find out more about what you do? And also, is there like a primer for people to fully understand what you guys are tackling? I'm assuming your website is a good place to start.
Yeah, I mean, we have a website. We have some videos on there, www.truweathersolutions.com. I will tell you, we have a YouTube channel for TruWeather. And there's some really good presentations in there that if you really care about this and want to learn about it, you can learn about it. And then just contact me because I'll educate one person at a time because I just believe, and we have a lot of partners. I want to talk about that. I love my
Yes.
partners. We have a lot of
Yes.
partners.
Yes.
TruWeather does that really believe in what we're doing. Future Flight Global, Skyway, New Air up in New York
Yep.
State,
Yep.
AeroX in North Carolina, Grand Sky up in North Dakota, the test range in North Dakota, the North Texas Council of Governors, NASA, the Texas Alliance Airport. I could go on and on. These are all first adopters of what we're doing. Ohio DOT,
Ohio is hot. Yes.
yep, and Utah. We've been done some work with them, and they're listening. Detroit. So people are getting it, and of course, weather is always the last thing on the list, even though it's the most impactful, uncertain thing that can happen to an operation. And, we're just going to keep working with our great partners to Metro Weather in Japan, IntelliSense. I can go on and on. We are building a TruWeather has a consortium of weather excellence. We don't do everything ourselves. I want you to think of me as an Uber integrator that understands this so well that we can pull it together. But we have custom weather, Meteomatics, Meteodrone. We have a lot of networks, both on the operator side, the industry side, and the weather side. And we like to bring it together and just get that effect, the synergistic effect. NASA's
Yeah.
been awesome, by the way, NASA and the
Yeah.
FAA. The FAA,
And
we
the
wrote a new weather
FAA and the
standard. We wrote a new weather standard, and it wouldn't have happened if the FAA didn't indulge me on it, and they
yeah.
did, and we're implementing.
And
So,
the DOT, I mean,
and the
everybody's
DOT,
pulling. And I think you're right, we've got a nice core team of, it's something that's shaping into a future, hopefully a consortium of some
University of
sorts.
North
I don't know.
Dakota. I don't want to forget about
Yes.
University of North
No, I
Dakota.
know. We will forget some people. Unfortunately, it's also time to go. So, Don, I want to thank you for talking to us. You're coming back because we have way too many things to talk about, and education is really what we all do really here. So, thank you for coming. Thank you for enlightening us. At least this was a good primer, a good starter. So, the question I'd like to ask our listeners and watchers right now
Choctaw. I don't want to forget Choctaw, my friend James Grimsley. I don't know.
yeah. Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah, good point. Yeah. So a question for our listeners and our watchers is what do you think AAM is? After having heard Don, who is one of the prominent stakeholders in the industry, what do you think it is? What is your understanding of that? So don't forget to like, to subscribe, to share, and to let us know your thoughts. And I'll put all the links in this, and there will be an article on electricairmobility.news. Again, thank you very much, Don, and then we'll see you guys. We'll see you guys soon again after this.